and I'm cold to the core. I swear I can't remember what my life was like before. I got the music in me, knew it simply had to be my destiny. I'm blessed to be the best within my CNHEND. Please believe not Ninja Gaiden. I'm not the guy to fight with them lightning. They come and dumb and I leave them enlightened.
What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from SBMTG. We like magic, and I got a budget beater for you today, man. This thing's only like $35, $40 on TCG Player, but it is strong right now. Here's Blue-Red Artificers. Now, Artificers is a deck that we've been able to build for a while now, yes, but I figured now would be a good time to revisit it because there's a Grixis version of it that is tearing up Magic Online right now. It's winning a lot of games, and the only reason it's Grixis is so it can play a couple of copies of the Scarab God like every other deck in the world right now. And yeah, Scarab God's awesome in the late game, and it's pretty sweet in this deck, but it's like $35, $40 right now, plus all the land you have to have for a 3-color mana base. The deck ends up being like $300, and that's just ridiculous. We can build this deck for like $35 right now and essentially keep the exact same backbone that still wins a lot of games because flying is really good in this format. Another reason to revisit the deck right now. You know, it wasn't that long ago that like the best deck in the format just before rotation was essentially a Flyers deck. You know, it had Selfless Spirit and Spell Queller. I hate Spell Queller. Heart of Kirin, Archangel Avacyn. You know, before that, Smuggler's Copter was everywhere, an amazing flyer. But since rotation happened, people just kind of pretend like Flyers don't exist. You know, like you see, Whirler Virtuoso tokens, occasionally a Glory Bringer. There are a couple of other things, you know, Aether Sphere Harvester, but for the most part, flying isn't a huge force in this format. So Flyers just get through. And this deck has like a bunch of 2 and 3 mana ways to put anywhere between 6 and 8 power on the battlefield. It's kind of crazy. So if you're interested, just hang out with me right here and Julie. Hey, baby. And we'll show you how we got it drawn up here. So I guess we're going to start with our Artificers, I suppose. We got 14 different people who produce artifacts in the deck. Aptly named, they all in fact produce artifacts. But we're going to start with 4 copies of Aether Sweeper here. Well, Swooper, first of all, it's really fun to say. I should at least point that out. Swooper is a great word. But second of all, my actual point is that it is better than you're already giving it credit for. That's right. I can hear you over there like Aether Swooper. But no, seriously, first of all, sir or madam, this is a Strictly Better Stormcrow, which is the best creature ever printed. So put that in your butt and smoke it. I don't know. But anyway, all jokes aside, the card is actually really good in this deck. You know, your 2-mana investment gets you a 1/2 flying body, not too shabby, and importantly, you get 2 energy, which can make you a servo when you're like really strapped, you know, when you want to. It'll make you a servo, but for the most part, you're going to be parlaying that, wheeling and dealing it into another Virtuoso Thopter, or a bigger Harness Lightning, or like Refresh or Ether Hub, which can be surprisingly relevant. So yeah, all 4 copies. This thing is actually really, really good for just 2 mana. It does a lot. Well, you already know this because I just said its name, but we're going to play 4 copies of Whirler Virtuoso, which you may or may not have known is an Artificer. So it's really, really good in this deck, and it was already really, really good. The thing is all over Standard. It's probably the single best 3-mana creature in Standard. I mean, there's other stuff, you know, there's Rogue Refiner, there's Champion of Wits, but at the end of the day, smoke clears, I think this might be the single best 3-mana creature that we have access to in Standard right now. You know, if they don't do anything about it, it gets out of control, and in this deck, we're making a lot of energy. Thanks to a card that I can't wait to talk about later. But we're making a bunch of energy and thus a bunch of Thopters. You can get 5, 6, or more power out of a Virtuoso at the end of the day. So Virtuoso's definitely going in. It's already one of the best creatures in Standard, and it's even better in this deck. We're going to play 2 copies of Piia, also an Artificer. Just so, they're all Artificers, but whatever. Piia is sort of copies 5 and 6 of Virtuoso, but you're trading a toughness, first of all, but mostly you're trading the ability to make more Thopters as the game goes on for a mana sink, which is really, really nice, that we got to have a mana sink in the later turns that can, like, pump those Thopters or other flyers that you're playing. It can help them get through against other flying creatures. There's just so much that Piia does. Really, really flexible card right now. And even when you get her late, like if you don't get her on curve, you know, you drop her turn 7 or 8 or whatever, you know, sometimes she can just be like a really expensive pump spell, and if that's what you want, then she's really good in that situation. And sometimes she'll be a way to like get a couple of dudes through for lethal too in the late game. So no matter what, you know, part of the game you draw a Piia, she can be really, really good. And again, we need a mana sink in this deck. We'll finish off the creatures with 4 copies of Maverick Choppers. Card's been in the format for a while, but it's been awesome this whole time. I promise you, the card has never not been good. I mean, even at the floor of this card, let's say you hardcast it for 5 mana, you're still getting 3 bodies, 4 power, and 2 of those bodies fly. So that's not a bad deal. But sometimes you'll cast it for just 2 mana, and even at like 3 or 4 mana, it's still a really good deal, you know? So especially after a couple of buffs that we're playing in the deck, card can just get out of control and put a lot of power on the battlefield for very, very little mana. And obviously, this stretches your battlefield an awful lot. Putting at least 3 bodies onto the battlefield is pretty awesome almost no matter what point of the game you're in. So whether you get it early through improvising it or you get it on turn 9, let's say, it's going to be a good card. So those are the creatures. Let's talk about the artifacts, and here's where things take a definite turn for the weird, starting with the 4 copies of Inventors Goggles, the whole reason that our entire creature base consists of artificers. I have a weird, like, flavor beef with this, and I never have flavor beefs with cards. I never like to talk about them in videos, but it just bugs me so much that this gives us a power boost, and I'm not, like, complaining about it necessarily. I mean, I like it. It's really good in this deck, but, like, I get that it gives a defensive bonus. It gives a toughness bonus because it's a wearable equipment. That kind of makes sense, you know, it protects our eyes. Toughness bonus, totally okay with me. But unless there's like lasers in them, I really don't get the +1. But we'll definitely take it. The card is actually super crazy in this deck where it is a 1 mana artifact for improvised purposes, so I'll at least touch on that. That's really, really relevant, but it's just crazy with all of our creatures, you know. We can put out a 3-power Maverick Choppers and a couple of Thopters. We can put out a 3/5 Whirler Virtuoso and at least 1 Thopter. That's insane. Like, even Aether Sweeper, sometimes as early as turn 2, is a 2/4 flyer. That's really, really good for your 2 mana investment. So, Inventors Goggles, this is definitely the deck for it. It actually kind of feels overpowered sometimes, especially when you have multiple goggles out. Things actually get crazy. Like, suddenly, you just have huge power flyers out of nowhere. But that's definitely not the weirdest card in the deck. The weirdest card in the deck is the 4 copies of Decoction Module, which is nutso. Real quick, just briefly at the beginning of the rant, just like I did with Inventors Goggles, this is a cheap artifact for improvised purposes, extremely relevant in this deck. So there you go. But card literally does everything else too. Like, it just does everything in this deck. It looks super weird. You might be doubting it at first, but trust me, Decoction Module is the truth in this deck, you know. Just with Whirler Virtuoso, essentially the first Thopter only costs 1 net energy, and then after that, all the Thopters really only cost 2 net energy. Just that right there is insane, but like, Maverick Choppers giving you 3 energy when it comes into play is pretty dope too. There's just so much that the card does. Piia gives you 2 energy when it comes into play, and you just funnel all that into more Harness Lightnings or energy for your Ether Hub, but often more Thopters. This is the way that we're creating so many Thopters in this deck, is because this is just a way to essentially decrease the rate on Whirler Virtuoso and fill the air with a buttload of Thopters, and it does that really, really well. Plus, don't just think that second ability doesn't exist. We're not going to gloss over that. That's crazy because every single creature in the deck, when returned to our hand, has essentially an ETB ability. You know, Piia gives us another Thopter for no energy cost. Sweeper give us 3 more energy. Return Maverick Choppers back to our hand, and we get 2 more Thopters when we play it again. It's just absolutely nuts. And we can use Module to save our creatures from spot removal. It just does everything. I know that if there's one card that looks weird and cuttable from this list, it's probably Decoction Module. Looks really dumb, but you gotta try it out, man. Like, it's absolutely nuts. If you play a Maverick Thopterist, then you suddenly just get a free Thopter if you have a Virtuoso out. There's just so much that this card does, and it makes your cards with Improvise cost less. I came back around. We're full circle now. And to finish off the artifacts, we're going to play 3 copies of Aether Sphere Harvester in the deck. I wouldn't mind a 4th copy, to be honest. You know, it's just insanely good against aggro. It comes into play and gives us energy, which is great for all kinds of reasons. You know, we can use it on other stuff, or we can just use it to fly in the air with lifelink for a couple of turns. Pretty good. 5 toughness is unbelievable. You know, it can block Glorybringer and live. There's just God, Aether Sphere is great right now, and it's definitely awesome that it can be crewed with just 1 Thopter. Or an Aether Swooper if you got nothing better to do with your Swooper. It's a fun word. That's a fun word, but still. Just Aether Sphere Harvester is maybe the best or second best vehicle in the format right now, especially if your format is full of Ram and Apparatus at your F&M or whatever. I recommend that 4th Harvester because it's dumb in that matchup. That leaves us room for 11 spells in the deck, and we're going to play at least 2 copies of Favorable Winds, a card from Ixalan. I didn't expect to see that in this deck tech, but anyway, it is a real, honest-to-God card from Ixalan, you guys, and I'm only playing 2 copies of it. Let me explain that. Well, honestly, it's kind of just plain and simple. I just don't think that there are 2 cards or even 1 card that I'd like to cut in favor of more favorable wins. That was a weird way of saying that. Actually, it was a perfect way of saying that. I meant to do it. But anyway, I just don't think that there are cuttable cards that I'd rather play favorable wins over. You know, we don't need a whole bunch of copies of this. We don't need it on turn 2 every game. It'll take us into the mid game to make a board full of Thopters that we really want to. So sometimes like a turn 5, 6, 7, or even later favorable wins is actually more where we want to be. You know, if we play favorable wins on turn 2, we're not playing Aether Sweeper or Decoction Module or Harness Lightning for that matter. So I just rather play it later on in the game when we already have a board full of Thopters. And a lot of times it's not even necessary really. It's kind of win Mori, but all it does is increase the clock. And in a lot of matches you will want to increase the clock and increase the explosiveness of cards like Whirl of Virtuoso. Making 2/2 Thopters is really, really good. Maverick Choppers, putting 2/2 Thopters into play is really, really good. So I think the favorable wins definitely has a place in the deck, but it doesn't have to come down early, and in fact doesn't have to come down a lot of the times until turn 6. So I don't think we have to play a bunch of copies. We can just play better cards instead of playing 4 favorable wins. The rest of the cards in the deck I can probably go through pretty quickly, starting with the 4 copies of Harness Lightning that you already knew were in the deck. You know, I've mentioned it a couple of times in the video. We're an energy deck, we got to play removal, so the bare bones of it is we'll play 4 copies of Harness Lightning. But, you know, something I don't think gets talked about enough is that, like, it's a really cool aspect of Harness Lightning is that it's a removal spell that doesn't have to be a removal spell, you know? If you don't have anything good to remove, or you're playing against control and you won't have that many good things to remove in the foreseeable future, at least, sometimes just 2 mana at instant speed for 3 energy is really good. I like that it's such a flexible removal spell that doesn't even have to remove a creature. Sometimes we'll just get value out of it by getting energy out of it. We're also going to play 3 main deck Metallic Rebuke, which is so good. You know, it's not hard to hold up 1 blue mana and still have the mana for a Metallic Rebuke in the mid game in this deck. And sometimes that'll make all of the difference. Counter a Sweeper on turn 5 or 6. Counter their Glory Bringer can be a really important play. Counter their Hazoret is insanely important a lot of the time. And obviously counter their Scarab God is important too. Plus, you know, Anointed Procession, Refurbish, Godfair's Gift. There's a ton of things that happen in the mid to slightly late game that you can counter with a Metallic Rebuke really easily for only 1 mana. It's just a crazy counter right now. And we're going to play 2 Reverse Engineer in the deck. Just a couple of copies. I don't think it's insanely important, but I do want a way to refill sometimes in the mid to late game. Top decking a Reverse Engineer on turn 7 or 8 feels really, really good because you're going to get an awful lot of value out of it before all is said and done. You know, 1 Reverse Engineer, and suddenly you're right back in the game with a Maverick Thopterist or a Whirl of Virtuoso, another Decoction Module. I didn't mention that. Multiples of Decoction Module are... ugh, they're dumb. But anyway, Reverse Engineer is an important card. I want the refill, but I don't want to exactly stack all the slots in the deck with Reverse Engineer. I think 2 is fine. Now, we're playing 24 lands in this deck, and some concessions have been made for the budget. Yes, Highland Lake is in Standard. It's from Amonkhet. You can Google that. If you don't believe me, I promise you I wouldn't just play a illegal card. It's in Standard. But if you have the money or you already have the cards, Spirebluff Canal is the first upgrade you want to make to this deck. Now, you may be wondering what just dropped in the background. I don't know if you heard that, but I think it was a stack of paper towels. I can't really see around the thing, but you may also be wondering why so many lands? Why so many lands? I started with a really low land count here. You know, 22 is what I started with. Our curve's relatively low. All of our big stuff can be improvised, but I still figured, eventually, that we needed 24 so we could hit 4 lands by turn 4 as reliably as possible without flooding. You know, in the Grixis list that runs a Scarab God, you want to get it on turn 4 every time, or 5, every time if possible. So I think 25 lands is right in that list. 24 in this, because you still want 4 on 4, as often as possible at least. You want to be able to do stuff like turn 3 Virtuoso, make a Thopter, into turn 4 Maverick Thopterist, you know, improvise the Thopter. And you also, really importantly, this is a little meta, but it's very important, you want to be able to turn 4, whether you're on the play or the draw, you know, do things like Whirl of Virtuoso and still have the mana to leave up for a Metallic Rebuke. You know, if you're on the play, you can counter their Hazoret. If you're on the draw, you can counter their Scarab God or their Glory Bringer. It's just insanely important to be able to go Piia or Whirl of Virtuoso turn 3, leave up that mana for Metallic Rebuke. But you have to have the lands to do it, so we have to have 4 by turn 4. Here's our pretty simple sideboard, honestly. You know, against aggro, we've got Magma Spray, Abrade, Sky Sovereign is pretty good in that matchup, and the mid-range matchup. We also stretch Abrade into the combo matchup. We're not great against Godfarer's Gift, so we have Abrade and Crook of Condemnation and Scavenger Grounds for that matchup. And also, when we come up against lists that do run the Scarab God, Crook of Condemnation and Scavenger Grounds are good in those matchups too. Against mid-range and combo, for that matter, we've also got Metallic Rebuke, and Negate is another really good card against combo decks like GPG, but it's also good against control decks and stuff too. So we stretch a good number of our sideboard cards here, like River's Rebuke, if we can get to turn 6, can be good against aggro, can be good against mid-range, can be good against tokens decks and such. And then Many Faces over here is pretty good in this deck too, where it can copy things like Maverick Choppers to Whirler Virtuoso, or can copy crazy creatures on the other side of the battlefield too. Just I don't know why Many Faces is only 50 cents still. This is really popping up in a lot of sideboards and even main decks lately. And again, I'm not complaining. It's only 50 cents is the right price for this card, but it just does so much right now and is really bonkers against energy. So we'll run it in the sideboard. And here's your power rankings right here. A final score of 61, not bad for your $35, $40 investment. That's pretty good. And again, the deck can win games, man. This deck has crazy long game, even without the Scarab God, thanks to Decoction module. I'm telling you, card is dumb. The card is dumb. Try it out. If you'd actually get to the mid and late game with Decoction module, you'd be surprised how much havoc the freaking thing can wreak, man. And we're not really bad. I don't know if you noticed this yet, but we're not really bad at anything. We're average in a lot of categories, but we don't necessarily sink in anything. We've got a fairly decent defense with all of our Thopters that can form this big wall. We've got Harness Lightning in the deck. Metallic Rebuke is surprisingly efficient counter magic. There's a decent amount of defense in the deck and a fair amount of offense. All those same flyers that could jump block for us can go in for the kill sometimes, especially if you've got, you know, a favorable wins out. It can get dumb sometimes. So the deck is actually structured really, really well, and there's a lot of good sequences. Like earlier, I talked very, very briefly, I mentioned this, about like how we've got 2 and 3 mana plays that make 6 to 8 power. Let me talk about that for a second, actually. Probably the coolest thing we can do in this avenue is if we somehow have 2 favorable wins out, which will happen occasionally, but obviously not very often. If we have 2 wins out, we play a Maverick Thopterus, well, that's 3 power per Thopter plus 2 power for the Maverick Thopterus. That's 8 power for as little as 2 mana. But if we just have like 2 goggles in play, let's just say, well, we get a 4 power Thopterus plus 1 power apiece for the Thopters. That's 6 power for as little as 2 mana. You know, that's pretty crazy. If we have a goggles and a wins, well, suddenly we're looking at 7 power for as little as 2 mana, you know, and it's really not hard to set ourselves up in these board positions. And this deck is an F&M beast, man. Like, against tier 1 decks, it's going to have to earn its wins. It can win, I promise you that. But against anything lower than that, tier 2 and tier 3 decks, we can eat them up a lot of the times. This deck has an awful lot of game against a lot of the stuff you'll see at F&M sometimes. So seriously, try this out. It's not much of an investment, and it can crush. And if you want to see this list all in one place instead of rewatching what is undoubtedly a long video, I imagine, at least, you know, my monitor cuts off in an hour, and it cut off 20 minutes ago. So this is probably a long video, unless I just really had to do that many retakes. We'll see. We'll see at the end product. But in any case, if you want to look at the whole deck in one place, click the first link in the description down there. That'll take you over to my sponsors and buddies at TCG Player, the cheapest place you can get this deck online. You can buy some of it. You can buy all of it. They don't care. They're nice guys. They help the channel out. So I hope you'll help me out and them by clicking that link and looking at the deck. But with that, I'm pretty sure I'm tapped out for now. You know, just do the YouTube stuff if you want to. I sincerely hope you liked it. If you did, click the thumbs up button. It helps me, or at least my mental state. It makes me feel good. So click the like button. If you haven't subbed yet, do that. Click the bell for the notifications, because rival spoilers are like, I don't know, like the day after tomorrow. They have to be super soon, because like I'm pretty sure the pre-release is like January 13th of 2018. So it's like really, really close. Spoilers have to be like a week from now at the very, very most. So click the notifications bell if you haven't done it, so you know when videos are coming. You can also follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev, another good way of knowing when videos are coming out. Or you can throw me a whole $1 if you want to. I mean, I know you work for your money. You work hard for your money. So you don't have to. I'll still keep trying and doing decks. But, you know, like if you want to, throw me a $1 on patreon.com/SBMTG. Keep the deck techs coming. And you'll also get to know what decks I'm doing next. You probably want that. So, yeah, pretty sure that's it, you guys. I'm Deb from The Place, and I'll catch you cats later. Remember, spread love. Be kind.